Oh, the shoulder roll.
Right? It's created here on Women Connecting Wisdom.
Ooh. Oh, I love a good dance. If you ladies are listening at the beginning of the year, that's what I said I was doing this year, more dancing. So,
Right?
yes.
I was speaking on somebody else's platform this week and I introduced them to our Women Connected in Wisdom shoulder roll
What
intro
did they
move.
say? What did they say?
They just laughed, you know. It was one of our guests that have been here. It was Cecile Armstrong, who's been a guest on the show before. We were talking about playing with possibilities this week, and it came up about dancing and that we created this move that both, you know, it's your
That's what
Zoom dance move.
makes it easy. It makes it easy.
How
How
the
are you
heck are you,
doing?
my friend?
I'm good. I'm grateful, tired and grateful.
Right,
Yes. What
right.
about you?
Yeah, about the same. Like a lot going on, a lot of really good stuff, and the world, you
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
so. There's a lot of really things to celebrate, a lot of things to grieve, and
Hmm.
holding both the grief and the gratitude this week for
Yeah.
the way things are going.
Yeah.
Oh,
Definitely hear you. I definitely hear you on that. I have been kind of out of my routine in the mornings, but I still think, even if I don't write it down, okay, what are you grateful for? You're getting yourself, you're thinking about what you want to do, visualizing the day. That's important, right? Making sure I pray, things like that. And what are you grateful for before you go and solve all these solutions for the different businesses or find all these different solutions for the businesses that you're in? So, yes.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. You
Well,
ready
you know,
to, what were you
that's
about
what
to
I was
say?
about to say. I was about to say I'm grateful for you and that we're on episode 81. And
Ooh.
should we do this official intro and kick
Of course. Kick it
episode
off.
81 off? Let's do it.
Yes. Hi, ladies. I am Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial business owner, the founder of Shalo Glow, an all natural skincare company. I am your champion for your self care, business care, and intentional wellness.
Hey, y'all, I'm Christine Gotro, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, published author, and dancing social worker who helps you upgrade yourself and community care.
Yes. Together, we are Women Connected in Wisdom, a podcast grounded in the 8 dimensions of wellness.
And we like to get together every week and bring on special guests and have intentional conversations about how to be wise in business, relationships, and well, like how do we do this? How do we do this in the midst of everything else we're doing?
So many questions. And I was talking to shout out to my best friend earlier. I was talking to her, and it's interesting how in life one time the choice that is the right decision will be the option that's the wrong decision. If you have a
Mm,
family now, or if your money is different, or if one piece of the situation is different, that completely changes what the best course of action will be for you. And that's why it's so important for me to have you ladies to run stuff through, like, hey, what do you think about this situation? Because
right.
I learned when I stepped down, when the COVID started, that I was only doing things the way I was taught how to do them. I
Mhm.
was only doing things one way, and I might not even think about the possibility of doing it another way, and not in a doubtful type of way, like, oh no, that's not going to work, but just hadn't considered it. So that's why I love intellectual wellness too. Like, what are all the different ways you can learn and learn new things and apply them, and where do you get your information from? Things like that.
I love it. Some of the best changes have come in my life from a friend or sometimes even a stranger asking, "Huh,
Mm.
why do you do that this way?"
Yeah.
Or like I was taught to do it this way, and like
Hmm.
broadening those perspectives. And there's sometimes we get perspectives or we get people that we listen to that were like, "Yeah, no, that one's not for me." Right?
Hmm.
I was at a conference last week. It was a really cool conference, and I was like, "Yeah, no, that's not for me." Some of the
Hmm.
things they talked about,
Yeah.
and but you don't know unless you listen,
Yeah.
unless you check it out, and then
Yeah.
you listen to your inner authority also
Mhm.
about, does that resonate with me? Is that true? Right?
I like that. Hashtag inner authority. Yes, and it's important to think about where your information is coming from, and sifting definitely helps me. This is the part that I'm going to take. This is the part I think I can leave. And even sometimes, and we'll talk more about it when we're in the conversation with our guests, probably, but it's remembering the limit that I have on new information. I had to stop listening some of these audiobooks. We're going through our book multiple times. These other books are going to have to wait for a second because of information overload. So being mindful of that too.
I love that. Yeah. Because you can get I was one of my people that I follow on Facebook, Heather Plett. She does a lot of work with holding space. She's up in
Mhm,
Canada and she
mhm.
was talking about decision fatigue, right? And I think yes, like we can learn all this new information. We can make all these and there's sometimes they were full. Like we're on our final proof of the book.
Mhm, mhm. No, really, really, in the final edit of these labels. So,
Right?
just learning new things and learning how to pivot, like, in the middle of everything. That's what, um just being creative of how to get to the solution still, even if the one way that you thought you were going to get there doesn't work, it helps. And for me, again, we've talked about this, the checklist helped me with that decision fatigue, right? I don't have to choose to drink water. I know that I should be drinking water in the morning and at night and throughout the day, of course. But me doing that helps it not pull as much willpower. The same thing for my uniforms at work. Yes, I have cute outfits that I wear when I'm a floor manager for the restaurant, but they're also the same clothes, just different colors. So all I have to do is mix and match because I'm operating like a billionaire and I don't have to worry about what I'm going to wear. It's just, is it clean or is it not? So, yes, decision fatigue. I hear you.
Well, being intentional. What I
Mhm,
hear in what you just said is you're being intentional.
mhm.
And when you know your values and when you know what's important to you and where you want to put your time, then
Yes.
that helps you to make intentional decisions.
Yes.
So you have a little bit of that extra energy left, all right?
Yes. Say no so you can say yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's
Hmm.
number 5, skill of self-care, right?
Hello.
So you mentioned it to our listeners earlier, but you want to expand upon what we're talking about today?
Yes. So today we are talking about intellectual wellness, and that includes having access to different sources of information and developing critical thinking and timely decision making skills. Also, continual learning through intentional intellectual growth, situations, and artistic creativity can help maintain one's intellectual capacity.
Mm, I love that definition. I
Hmm.
love that definition because so often, we think it's just school or it's just this line of studies. And
Yes.
intellectual wellness is so much more like
Hmm.
that we can expand ourselves and keep going. I think
Yeah.
we talked about, oh, it was the training we did last week. We were doing after the show, we
Hmm.
were lucky enough to go train Mosaic Georgia's staff. They are
Yes.
an assessment center for folks who are dealing with trauma. And we were lucky enough to go talk about the 8 dimensions of wellness with them. And we were talking about intellectual wellness, and Wordle came up. So
Mhm.
this is one of the things with my family that we do. We put it in the bucket of intellectual wellness, but we have a group chat, and every day somebody will do the New York Times Wordle,
Mm.
where you have to guess the letter, and then we'll put you get to see the results in this fun little color coded box of like how many times it took you and things like that. And we share that with each other. And I look for fun ways to bring in intellectual wellness.
I think that's really important and everything in general, to be able to have fun with it, whether it's financially or even spiritually. I know spiritually sometimes it could feel heavy. It's so important. What's going to happen after these type of questions can make it a little more of a serious topic for a lot of people. But I think about it as a relationship and every part of the relationships that I want to have a little bit of fun, a little bit of playfulness, like you brought up. So I think it's important to remember.
Well, I'm excited to bring on our guest today. Are you
Me too.
ready?
Yeah, let's
All
do it.
right. I'm going to read her bio and we're going to bring her on. I'm delighted to introduce y'all.
Mhm.
Dr. Amanda Kemp works with healers and feelers. Oh, my type of people who are rooted in justice, but know we need to jump paradigms to experience liberation. She's an Amazon best-selling author and a racial justice and mindfulness mentor. We want to welcome to our stage Dr. Amanda Kemp. Woohoo! Hello.
Yes. Welcome.
Hello, hello. Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome. How are you today?
Girl, I'm sleepy. I feel like there must be something going on energetically,
Mhm.
or else some of us are doing a lot of work in our downtime. We're out here working on the energetic level.
Mhm.
So,
I would completely agree with you on that.
mm,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Where are you streaming in from? What part of the world are you in?
Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Mm.
That's about an hour and a half, 2 hours out of Philly.
I have
Okay.
driven through there before, and I actually grew up in Lancaster, Texas. Isn't
Mm.
that interesting?
Hmm.
I
That's
bet
I
where
would
you
my
it's
folks still are.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've always been fascinated by that because you know how when you're a kid and you realize there's different places in the world that are named the same thing. So I've
yeah.
driven through there once because I was doing something up in that part of the world and I
Mm.
wanted to see it because of where I grew up. So
Hmm.
it was awesome.
It's very
Beautiful.
green. It's
It
very
is.
Mm.
green. I feel blessed. I didn't grow up in a green space. I grew up in New York City primarily. So, I grew up where there was a sign saying don't walk on the lawn, you know what I mean? And we're supposed to keep weight. So it's really nice to live somewhere that's green and a lot of trees.
Right. Well,
Yes.
and you are a person that talks to the trees, right?
Yes.
Tell our listeners about that because we met through the Awarepreneurs group
Yeah.
and got connected on LinkedIn. And I can't even remember what post you were talking about, Dr. Kemp, that I was like, oh, I need to know her better. And she needs to meet my friend Cecile. Like, because we have these
Yes.
conversations between
Yes.
us
Yes.
already, but about the trees and nature.
Yeah.
So, you get some of your wisdom from
Oh
them.
my gosh. So in April 2021, I was about to keel over from this real burst in my business. And, but I just couldn't make myself stop. Somehow I thought I was just too essential, So I got a message from myself. I had a business coach whose method of assisting you for making decisions was to have you tap into your deep self. And so I got a message from my deep self that said, stop everything, talk to the trees. They want to adopt me. Yes.
Mhm.
And as I said, I was raised in the city. I was raised primarily in the South Bronx. So for me, nature is a little bit scary. I grew up with it being, not familiar, very much, everything has a street name and lights on all the time. So it's really been a journey to get to this point where I was willing to sit down and journal with the trees and get to know them by like no, that's a white pine and that's a star gum tree and whatnot. Like that's not what my PhD is in. So, um, but when I started to engage with them, what I found was a lot of love, just so much love coming out towards me and acceptance and encouraging me, like touching the earth, and the green was what was needed for now.
I love that. I was doing a women's group. I was participating in a women's group 2 weekends ago, and we were doing some exercises around this, like about really getting in touch with where you live and going around and identifying the trees. And I had done a lot of this work in my labyrinth. I'm lucky enough to have this backyard that has this kind of hidden garden and it has a labyrinth, and I do meditating out there and all those things. So those trees and I know each other really, really well because I sing to them often in the morning. And but what I hadn't realized is that I kind of keep that part of myself hidden. And
Yes.
then I hadn't been in the front yard talking to my trees. And it was fascinating because when I went to the front yard, I realized one of my big trees in the south part of my lawn is a red oak. And I graduated from Red Oak, Texas. Like it was fascinating. It was like, this is one of my guardian trees. And
Mm,
I didn't even realize that the connection. So
yes.
it's powerful work when you start looking at this.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I have a big oak in
Mhm.
my back area. And and I call that Papa Oak because it felt very masculine and protective energy from it. And I was dialoguing with that tree, and Papa Oak was like, you know, thank you, finally waking up. We've been holding it down for you here, and you finally awakened so we can partner. So yes, yes.
So that's what I have a question about. Would you mind going more in depth about how do you partner with the trees? How do you, so you feel this loving energy, right? Which I definitely get from nature. I love being outside in nature. Um, how do you, what was it that made you notice it? And then, yeah, what do you do with it?
Um, so I felt very awkward at first when I got that message from myself. So I just started very simply by sitting down outside in under a tree. I picked, I have lots of trees where I live, so I picked a tree, and I just started very gently with "hello," kind of like that, "hello," and then just leaning back against the tree and trusting myself, like saying, okay, well, if I knew how to talk to a tree, what would I say, and what is a tree saying back to me? Just playing with it, actually, Shannon, not putting too much weight on it, just allowing it to, but making a commitment to show up and to write. And the other thing is that I'm in a spiritual community where it's important for us to value and to make offerings, to the natural world, to say thank you. You were mentioning gratitude earlier. So, when I was a little girl, I used to sing all the time. So, one of the things I've reawakened in myself is just waking up and walking around in the yard and singing as an offering to the trees.
I have found that trees love when you sing to them.
Mm,
And I used to be awkward about that too, Dr. Kemp. Like, I'd be like, I'm out here singing. They're going to be calling the people with the white coats to come get me. But it's very funny because when I meditate and I don't sing, I get a message like, hey, like, what? Like, and I also notice, like, when I'm in nature and connecting with nature, often nature gives us gifts back.
Yeah.
Like, they'll drop a leaf or they'll drop something and there's no wind. It's like they just like, here it comes. And I've had that happen several times that I'll ask a question and it'll be answered with a shake of a tree limb or a gift coming. And it's, at first you're like, okay, what, am I making this up? What's happening? And then the more people I talk to that have had this experience, like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think about movies and stuff, and as a precursor, not that I use movies as a judge for reality, okay? Just because I know that's important. We're talking about where we get our information, right? But there are also a lot of movies about trees talking and the powers that they have and all this stuff. So I don't think that's just from nowhere.
right.
Everything that lives breathes and communicates a certain way. So the earth is alive, the
Yeah.
waves move, the trees blow in the wind and are rooted down.
Yeah.
So I, since talking to Cecile and talking to the ladies on Women Connected in Wisdom, I've definitely been more intentional about thanking the birds for singing. Hey birdies, good morning. I'll whistle
Yeah.
back a little tune, little echo back, and just really appreciate the beautiful earth that we live
Yeah.
in. Yeah.
I think it's like reinserting ourselves into the web of
Mhm.
life,
Yeah.
you know? And I was just reading this book called Finding the Mother Tree by Suzanne Simard.
Hmm.
You can find, she's on TED Talks. Her book is really doing really well, which is really good. I love it
Yeah.
that her book is doing so well. And she talks about the mother tree or mother trees as having this incredible photosynthetic capacity to support the whole web of life. And we were just doing a self-forgiveness call in my community today where I was likening us to mother trees some of us have agreed to be here on the planet at this time to anchor peace and to anchor a vibration of love with
Mhm.
justice, and in order to feed the web, the rest of this web of life, we need to consciously open ourselves to the light, to love from the trees or from our ancestors, from elders in our community who love us unconditionally. It's almost like
Mhm.
practice
Yeah.
taking that in, using the trees as a model for how to live, and how to give.
Yeah.
Because in my experience with trees, when I've asked them about, I am someone who maybe it's accurate to say is an overgiver or
Mm.
has in the past
Mm.
like given to the point of complete depletion, right?
Mhm.
Especially when we consider ourselves essential people and we're in
Mhm.
Virgo season. So there are a lot of Virgos out there. You know what I'm talking about? We love to do our sacred work. I mean, it's why we're here. It makes us feel alive, but we can overdo it and then we're out of balance.
Mhm.
And what the trees told me when I was talking to the trees about guilt, about when do I know I've given enough
Mhm.
time, given enough money, given enough attention to others? When is, and me frankly feeling guilty, like every time I say no, that
Mhm.
uh am I being selfish? Am I exercising my privilege? You know? And what
Mhm.
what the message I got back was feed the core. When you feed the core, so the roots and the trunk of the tree, the inside, then what you give will naturally flow to the outside, meaning those branches, those flowers, those fruits, that we
Mhm.
bear. But
Mhm.
first, we have to feed the core, feed the unseen. So the work that we do in the world is usually seen. It's, the things that we write, it's the people who we serve, it's the products that we send out to people. And I'm looking forward to my shea butter.
Yes.
I mean, that's
Yes.
all good, right? But the trees were like, first you feed the unseen, and then the
Mhm.
unseen feeds the seen. And we have to be patient with ourselves to receive first. And when there is not enough there, to pause, to trust, to pause, so that the to catch it up, so that we can then feed the seen.
I love that.
Yes,
And
it's
it's
deep.
Yeah, it's really deep. And I think that is relevant on so many levels. Even like my hair. I'm like, why is my scalp so dry? Oh, well, my hair is really long now, sucking all the water out. Let me put some more water in my scalp. So I moisturize the scalp first and then everything else. But
Yes.
when other people helping the core, I think that's so important. Sometimes people ask us for like the extremity stuff. Maybe they don't want to do it, or they see that we have a skill, but that might not be the time or place that we would spend the emotional capacity or whatever capacity it would take. But if you're a real friend and you really want to do it, that's a great question to ask yourself. Is it the core of this person, or will it not take away if I can't be there like I want to?
Yeah. Um, I think this thing about feeding the core, it's almost like trusting. Well, it's also has to get. It also affects like what we consider our worth. I was talking to another entrepreneur friend of mine, woman friend of mine,
Mm,
and truthfully, you may see me for an hour and 15 minutes leading a presentation, right? A
right.
meditation, a workshop, coaching you, mentoring you. And you may say, oh, well, that was only an hour, Amanda. Why does it cost X amount? But let me tell you, what does it take? That has to be fed to the core, the unseen, before I can show up and give you the seen. You know what I mean? And I
Yes.
think that when we think about what we charge or what we're worth, or is it too much, we forget that
Mm,
for every 1 hour of seen, there's probably like 5 hours of unseen preparation. And the other piece is that when we articulate this to people, we help to up level each other.
mhm,
You know what I mean? When you say, no, I can't give you that for free, or no, I can't barter with you on that, or
Mhm.
no, I can't do that thing that you would like me to do. um, you're being honest, and you're giving them a chance to reckon with what does no, or not at that price, or whatever
Mhm.
it is, feel. What does that feel like? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's almost like we
absolutely.
up level each other out of our scarcity and victim kind of
Mindset.
mentality.
Yeah, the paradigms that you're talking about. And I think even, financially, I wanna know what I'm working on is not being scared of the price. I don't wanna be scared. Trip is $5,000. Okay, it's $5,000. Now I know how much I need to make. But the thing is, when you don't know what to budget, when these 5 things are usually free, now you have unrealistic expectations. So I'm enabling you,
Right.
or undercutting your development, because you're
Yeah.
gonna go into another situation thinking you have everything you need, and now you're going to be disappointed because you're not going to get to the solution because you're unprepared. So
Mm.
if I can set you up saying, hey, this is realistic, then I feel like it helps in that way too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I feel like, you know, um, someone told me her rate, right? And I was like,
Hmm.
oh, well, can you do it for me for X rate? And she said, okay. Meaning I talked her down. And
Hmm.
then I thought about it later and I said, no, Amanda,
Hmm.
can't do that. This
Hmm.
is her rate. You know what I mean? It's almost like honor that, because I want to be honored. We
Hmm.
got to practice with each other. And this is what I mean about we get in that circle of scarcity,
Hmm.
and it takes courage. I think it takes, I'm in the middle of you know, designing where I go forward, and, for people who want to work with me one-on-one, do I want to work with them? And, and what does it take to work with me? You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
I've been out here a minute. I'm expensive.
Hello, add tax. We talked about raise the price. Yes.
No, but it's true. I was at a retreat at my house, and some part of me said, was talking about sacred work and sacred marriage. It was saying, like, I'm only available for sacred marriage and sacred work, and I'm very expensive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just state it. I love that. I was thinking about what you said earlier with be used to being an overgiver. And so
Hmm.
many of our listeners, and I'm guilty of that. And like, it's just, I think that's what's expected a lot of times until we start having boundaries and feeding that core first.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that. I had to have a conversation today with a board I sit on that said, I need to back off because I have, we're under all these deadlines, all this is happening. And I think that I was thinking about that when you were talking earlier about the courage it takes, because, I love this organization. I love the work they do in the world. And I need to pause
Yeah.
and feed my core,
Hmm.
because branches are starting to fall off. It's like, so even having that in the awareness and the noticing in ourselves, because
Hmm.
it's easy. I mean, for some people, it's not easy to say no to the bad stuff, but it gets easier as you practice your boundaries, right? It gets easier to say, nope, no, thank you. Not going to do that. No, not. But I've been finding lately, it's harder. It's hard to say no to the good stuff.
Yeah.
And you've got to, because you can have too much good stuff.
Yeah. I think Shannon hit it when she said, how much can you take in?
Yeah.
Right?
Right?
It's like it's almost like getting really clear on your lane
Right.
and then staying in it. You know what I mean? Like, for
Hmm.
me, having a very long and extensive background in racial justice and my PhD in African American studies, and that was my lane, right,
Mhm.
for so long. And now what's really evolving as my lane is this. It's the trees. It's about helping people to get to this other dimension of wisdom, and
Hmm.
having that inform everything we do. But that's like a new lane, and what people want me to do, or what people have paid me to do previously, is the
Hmm.
old lane. So the switch takes some courage
Mhm.
and groundedness, so
Hmm.
connection
Mhm.
to the wisdom, our
Mhm.
connections that give us wisdom.
Yes.
Um, and I'm going to say, like, people around you who are going to support you in narrowing down. And this is the thing again with Virgos. We like to go specific. We're not like, oh, wow, let me do every flower in the garden. You know, certain types of us are very good when we go real pinpointed.
So you can niche. I'm the exact opposite, Dr.
Yeah.
Kemp. I like niching is torture for me.
Yeah.
Um, but I love that about really figuring out. One thing that is bubbling up for me as you speak is I could name 5 people right now that are going through this very exact same thing. That
Mhm.
people are being asked to switch and do things different and look at things in a different way and listen with all their senses,
Yes.
Mhm.
listen with everything. So, I have a question for you. I think I already know the answer, but I don't know. So, my family, like, we will literally take trips to see certain trees in the world. And do you have like a favorite tree or a favorite place you go or anything that you've done like that that you are like, oh, if you're ever in this part of the world, come
Mhm.
visit this tree?
Wow.
Mm.
I love that question.
Mhm.
Um, well, on my where we live, the land we steward, we call it Kukula Day. And we got closer to it because of the pandemic when everybody had to stay home. So we finally stayed our behinds home and started to appreciate the physical space that we were co-creating with, right? So there's a tree here, we call her Regenerate, because she regenerated herself and after being cut horribly. And she was a mentor to me that summer when I started to connect with trees. So I have to shout out to Regenerate. Papa Oak I love because I feel safe. So these are trees on my property. So if you come to Kukula Day, maybe for one of our women's retreats, you'll get to experience them, sit underneath them, make friends with them. Um, there's a tree I do want to see. It's supposed to be the oldest white pine in the Northeast. It's in Western Massachusetts, and my birthday's coming up soon.
Okay.
So I was thinking, and my husband said he would take me, anywhere I wanted to go. So I was like, maybe I want to take a drive up to see that tree. It's a little bunch of old growth forest that got missed when they were doing all that cutting and logging up there in the Northeast.
I recently visited a tree in North Georgia that was like the second oldest poplar that the same thing had, or the second largest poplar. And the same thing had happened. It had gotten missed. They thought it was the largest, so they purposely didn't cut it when they were cutting a lot of other things. And it ended up being the second or I can't remember. It was one, but it was huge and it was off this trail and we purposely went to go visit it. And if you've ever stood in front of some of those grandfather or grandmother trees that are just ancient. So another favorite of mine is Angel Oak Tree off the South Carolina coast. If you ever get a chance to go see it, it is one of the
Mhm.
oldest oak trees on the East Coast. And it is huge. She is just a beauty and sprawling. I'll put the notes in the show notes, y'all. But anytime you're near Charleston, South Carolina, there's a tree that folks need to go visit because she's magical. Like we visit her every time we're in that part of the world, is we go say hi.
Mm.
Shannon, do you have
I
any
like
trees that you love to go visit?
No, I haven't been that intentional about my relationship with the trees. Our chapter in the book about the relationship you have with your home and the space and um interestingly enough, Naruto and talking about the village in the leaves has made me appreciate being in the trees and the green like Dr. Kemp was talking about. So not yet. That's what I'll say, not yet.
I love that. Not yet. Because for
Yeah.
all of us, we're all evolving, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it's trees. For other people, it might be. I think you were mentioning. Were
Mm.
you mentioning a hawk?
Oh, I was
Christine
mentioning a
mentioned the
hawk.
birds. We
Yeah,
both mentioned the birds,
birds
yeah.
show up for me very often.
Yeah.
And we were in a women's group, and the hawk didn't show up for me this time. It showed up for one of my friends. But we were literally doing ceremony, and this hawk comes to her window, pecks on the window, and did not leave until she went over and did this little dance. Like, she moved to the left, the hawk moved to the left. She moved to the right, the hawk moved to the right. And then once the hawk and her saw each other and like had this little repertoire, then it left. But it was not leaving until she came over and acknowledged it and was like, "Hey, pay attention, because I'm here. I'm here to
Yeah.
bring you a message." And so, I think when you start being aware of those things, when you start being aware of the natural world, being able to partner with you and bring you messages
Yeah.
and talk to you. This same weekend, I was doing a labyrinth walk. I was doing a ceremony. I was meditating and doing this homework that we were supposed to do because it was a virtual conference, and so we weren't together. So we were supposed to do this homework before we got together the next morning.
Mhm.
So I am often in my labyrinth at sunrise, and so I'm holding this homework. I'm walking towards the center of the labyrinth. The minute I stepped into the center, I look up and here's this doe that is literally right across the fence from me, looking at me. And she didn't step up there until I stepped into the center of the labyrinth. And then we have a little conversation, and she jumps over the fence and walks around my labyrinth, which she's often walking through the center of my labyrinth because I see her knocking over, like, I know who's been there by the way the rocks are moved and their patterns and things like that. But she walked around and just hung out while I was, finishing my homework and saying hello to the morning. And, it was pretty powerful that she's like, "Yep, I'm here."
Yeah.
During that part, part of my homework was I was listening and asking my land, the land that I steward, the history of what had happened there.
Mhm.
And I was getting very clearly at that time that it was a place for hunters and gatherers, and it was a place of travel. And right when, kind of I was thinking and the images were coming about hunting and gathering, you got this deer walking through my it was wild.
Mm.
It was pretty special.
Mm.
I love seeing it. And it's interesting when I think about nature, I also think about the industrialization, right? We're so separated because we're not out getting water every morning and picking the
Mhm.
berries and wondering where the meat is going to come from and setting up the tent into the ground. Now
Yeah.
if we even leave the house now, it's completely different. We don't have to worry about the spices coming from the other side of the world.
Yes.
We've had them our whole life, well, my whole life, right?
Mhm.
Um, so it's interesting, but you said a word that I want to talk a little bit more about, Dr.
Mhm.
Kemp, evolve, right?
Mhm.
So I think it's interesting your work with self-forgiveness right now. How do
Yeah.
you, what was your journey like from, and maybe it wasn't this starting point to this ending point, but racial justice and having those conversations with the people around you to
Yeah.
self-forgiveness and
Yes.
sitting under the trees.
Yes. Yes. Well, so I'm going through another transition in my life right now, but the first when I started to expand my spiritual perception, ability to see and to hear and to feel, um, beyond my Christian upbringing, when I just expanded it, and I, when I was praying about a play, how to like make it more heartfelt. It was a play about Benjamin Franklin and slavery. And so, in answer to the prayer, a poem came, and the the first lines of the poem was, the ancestors are calling you. The ancestors are calling you. They say, remember me. They say, forgive me. They say, I forgive you. And that was like, that came straight through. And I was like, wow, they say, forgive me. They want us to forgive them. And, the play was about Benjamin Franklin slavery. So you could say it's about forgiving white people for slavery. But it wasn't saying the white ancestors are saying, forgive me. It was saying they say. So what I got from that was that um, they were letting me know we're in this web of mutual forgiveness. Like, I forgive, they're already forgiving me. you know, for what I haven't even done yet. You know what I mean? And so that really was my start down this journey on forgiveness. And what made me think of self forgiveness as being so important was when I got married again for the second time, and I was we created a biracial family, and and it was a hard road. It was a hard road, and I had to have a no, I didn't have to. At a certain point, I was at the limit of my intellect and of my emotional capacity. And so, what needed to happen was for me to hold myself with compassion. So, that's another word for forgiveness. If forgiveness kind of throws you off and makes you think, something is not going to be held accountable, start with self compassion, holding myself gently. And what's evolved for me since that time, which would have been around 2015, 16, to now, 2022, is coming to a place where I know there are lots of parts of me. You know, I could name it by body or I could name it by age, different parts of me energetically that exist. And we're not going, we're, there's no way for me to go through this life by trying to kill any part off. You know, there's no murder. You know what I mean? You could lie to yourself and think you can just, repress something to death, but it will show. It shows in us physically, right? Even if we doesn't show in us, apparently psychologically, it'll show up in our bodies. So this work of self-forgiveness, of holding myself with compassion, definitely has been confirmed by the trees. And the way that they say, when I was talking to Regeneration about how she dealt with her wounds, first thing she said to me is, dear one, she's like, dear one, I'm going to try to help you understand this, but I don't look at it the way you look at it. For me, this is not a wound. She said, something happened. And then another tree close to us told me, I said, why do you look so good? And she said, because I have no past. And I said to the tree, but you have rings. I was like, I am tired of getting this message. She said, oh, yes, I have rings. She says, but I don't hold on to anything. Everything that happens passes through me. I give it to the mother. So this is like, if you hear it, this is very disruptive. Because the way we normally hold things, the way I've normally held things is good things happen and there are bad things happen. And the bad things that happen need to be accounted for and people need to take responsibility, etc. But what these trees are saying is something happened. I don't hold it as a wound. I let it pass through me to the mother. So, wow. So then,
right?
How do I hold myself? How do I hold you? Now we're moving out of the paradigm. We're moving out of the paradigm of right and wrong and us versus them. We're in another paradigm.
Powerful.
What does Eleanor say?
Eleanor is listening today. Hello, Eleanor. We always love it when you're here. She says, an excerpt from the Redwoods, Joseph Strauss, to be like these straight, true, and fine, to make our world like theirs, a shrine. Sink down, O traveler, on your knees. God stands before you in these trees.
Yeah.
And Brandy, shout out. Hello, Brandy. Sending you lots of love. This is so good. Thanks for this conversation.
Of course. Of course. Okay, so self-compassion. I hear you. And I hear you on I grew up in New York. We weren't supposed to be on the grass, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about that? How you, I mean, I guess, how would you describe that from not as much interaction to now talking to the trees?
Yeah. So I just want to honor. So I was born in Mississippi. I was born in Biloxi. And my mother's line is from Alabama, Black Belt farming people who moved for a better life to the Gulf, to the Gulf Coast. So I was like, how many people moved to Mississippi for a better life? But that was in our family story. And
Right.
um, so we historically, I feel, as African descended people in the United States, we have had this intense relationship with land, with
Mhm.
nature. If you
Mhm.
read Toni Morrison's Beloved, the plantation where all the SHIT went down was called Sweet Home. And what
Mm.
they remembered about it was how beautiful the trees were.
Mm.
So we have that in our lineage, right? In our
Right.
DNA. But then for safety, so many of us fled or were run out of our spaces, and then we end up in these cities, which
Mhm.
are loud and uh, divorced from nature, and
Mhm.
like it wasn't until I was in, I think I was 22, 23, I met a dance teacher when I was in LA, and he said every day make sure you get on some earth.
Mm.
I don't remember another adult telling me that before this teacher said that. And how essential is that to feeling grounded, to actually
Mhm.
letting your feet touch earth? Better barefoot, but even if you have to keep your shoes on, at least get the feet on the ground. You know what I mean? And for
Yeah.
me, um, when I was a little girl living in the Bronx, I wanted to live in a house. I lived in the projects, and I wanted to live in a house. I wanted to have, something smaller. I wanted to have something more humane. And for me, that's what a house meant. That's what a
Mhm.
yard meant.
Mhm.
Um, and then eventually, I left home. I was in foster care, and I left and I went to a boarding school. And all of a sudden, there was a lot more green. Why? Because the green is often in big city areas is relegated for the wealthy. You
Mm.
know what I mean? Um, so anyway, so over the course of my journey, and it really has been a slow journey of going forward toward nature, pulling back, going forward toward nature and pulling back. Um, I I have become someone who hugs trees. And I don't know if you remember this, because I don't know how old y'all are, but there was a point at which when you called someone a tree hugger, that was an insult.
Mhm.
Especially if you were a change maker, if you were in the movement,
Mhm.
and oh my, what are you, a tree hugger?
Right.
And I remember people criticizing Alice Walker,
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
novelist, poet,
Mhm.
essayist, uh,
Mm-hmm.
because she evolved in her work toward this, engagement with nature. And I remember one of her poems said, when they do something bad to you, like when they kill your children, hug a tree. When they do X, Y, and Z, hug a tree. And I just remember one of my contemporaries at the time being like, "For real, Amanda? For real?" So, and now it's like there's a wisdom in that, because we are talking about, if we really want liberation, I think we need to shift the paradigm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't want to get too controversial. I was about to say something, but
It's okay. Say it.
a paradigm shift does not mean stay in the current system.
Right.
It doesn't mean stay in us versus them.
Mhm.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean,
Mhm.
Yep.
I'm talking about a real paradigm shift. And justice and punishment are not the same thing.
That is so true.
Mm.
No? And accountability and tearing people down is also not the same thing.
Mhm.
Yep.
So if we look at ourselves holistically, this gets back to forgiveness. If we look at ourselves holistically, then we've got to find the space for all of me,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
including the itch bay, you know, who wants what she wants when she wants it and doesn't want anyone else to come first. Including, the soft, really afraid part. You know what I'm saying? All these are parts of me.
Mhm.
And if you want your child, if you love let's say you have a daughter, which I do, and you just want the best for her, you know, then you want a new paradigm for her, so she doesn't have to do what you had to do to survive.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Such a powerful conversation, Dr. Kemp. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really,
Mm.
I feel like we are evolving together. I don't think we could have
Mhm.
had this conversation 10 years ago,
Mm.
you know.
We could have in my backyard when nobody was listening, but
Right.
Mm.
That's
it's
exactly it. It would have been happening in small, very private places.
Mhm.
But this is becoming a public conversation that's appealing to a wider and wider range of people who don't consider
Mhm.
themselves to be priestesses, or in the
Right,
Wiccan thing or the pagan
right.
thing. It's
Mhm.
really broadening out, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm
Mm.
grateful to the priestesses who were holding it down when it had to be underground.
Right.
Mm.
Sure.
So every week we do a wisdom in action, right? And not just knowing more information, but actually putting it into motion. So for this week, Dr. Camp, when you think about intellectual wellness, what are you working on? What's your hashtag?
Mm, mm, mm.
Let me see.
Ooh,
What's
this
mine?
relates to what you said, Shannon.
Okay.
Uh, one of I have we did a queen's retreat, and the first thing that we said affirmed was, I am enough. I have what I need. I trust me. So I encourage you, what I'm working on is, we don't need more information right now. What we need is to integrate and use our inner authority to sort it,
Hmm.
and then to take action.
I love that. That's what I'm gonna do. That's what I'm gonna do for mine too. Hashtag actually. So I like the sort and take action. I think that's definitely helped me. Let's see, self-forgiveness. What am I working on this week? Intellectual wellness. Let's see. Ooh, that was for our call before. We were talking about conquering conflict. Let's see. Do you have yours, Christine? What is your wisdom in action this week?
I actually do. Mine is going to be hashtag feed the core. I
Yeah.
loved that metaphor. And I think I'm going to do two. And
Mm,
hashtag go hug a tree, because
Mm.
we're not doing enough of that, y'all. So I am, before today, I've been a really quiet tree hugger. I mean, my people know that I'm a tree hugger, but I don't usually talk about it. But yeah, I love hugging trees and hanging out with the trees and singing to the trees. And I just, and what you said, Dr. Kemp, about get outside every day. We talk about
mm.
this on this show. Like,
Yeah, we do.
it's so simple, but it's so necessary. Get outside, connect with the earth, connect with the trees, connect with yourself in this
Mm.
process. So my hashtags are going to be hashtag feed the core and hashtag hug a tree.
I like it. Mine is hashtag barefoot and loving it. I'm from Alabama too, right? People are like, oh, you're just a country girl, you like your feet without, yes, without shoes on it. Yep, I'm from the country, and yes, you're right. I like putting my feet on the ground, so I'm gonna do that, barefoot and loving it.
Oh, thank
Mm.
you. I love that.
Yes,
I love them all.
absolutely.
And for
Yes,
our listeners out there, feel free to add your comments, add your hashtag. What's your wisdom in action this week? Give us
yeah,
some feedback about this conversation. Like and subscribe where you're listening. And Dr. Kemp, thank you so much for coming. I feel like we could keep talking for hours, but we do have to wrap. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom. Before you
yes,
go, we're going to put it in the show notes. But if people want to work with you and find out more about your work, how do they
yes,
do that?
Well, they can go to Dr. Amanda Kemp on YouTube,
Okay.
and they'll come to my channel. And specifically, there's like a beautiful meditation that I lead to help you get in touch with the feminine divine that you connect with. So look
Mm.
for that there.
All right, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. And you have also so graciously offered our listeners the free link, and tell them a little bit about the free offer that they're going to get on in the show notes.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, if you sign up for this guided meditation to help you get to forgiveness of yourself, to holding yourself with compassion, to holding yourself just the way the divine mother or the earth mother or the feminine divine, whatever it is that works for you, to be able to see yourself that way. That's what this meditation is. So that's what the show notes will lead you to.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
Yes.
your work in the world. Thank you for coming and sharing it with us. And we're so delighted to be connected.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Oh my gosh, that was so yummy. Like I
Yes.
looked up and I'm like, almost an hour was gone.
Every time that happens. Like, we're out of time already, but that's why we
Right?
gotta keep having the conversation. Yeah, it doesn't have to be limited to just now, but,
Oh,
it's
I
good.
wanted to put Eleanor's hashtag up here. Hashtag Mother Nature knows and loves you. Oh,
Yes.
yes, Eleanor. So true.
Mm.
I love that.
Yeah, me too.
Well, any last words, my friend, before we wrap episode 81?
Mm. I don't think so. What I actually, always I say I don't think so, and then I come up with something. So what I'm thinking about is, sometimes it can be overwhelming. You're trying to learn new things, start a business, work, different hats to wear, all the different parts, like Dr. Kemp was saying, the parts of yourself that show up in your everyday lives and your responsibilities. Sometimes it's difficult to be intentional about continuing to grow, So if you need support in that, we do have Women Connected in Wisdom, the community. Come join us, be part of the different ladies who are doing different things in each dimension, and if you need
Mhm.
support and intellectual, we have the experts for that, financial, spiritual, physical. That's why we're building it, so that you don't have to do it alone, and you don't always have to be the person with all the answers. It might be a tree, it might be Christine, it might be Dr. Kemp that can help you with that. So
Right.
get connected and stay plugged in.
I love that.
Yeah.
And y'all, before next week, we're
Mhm.
launching the Women Connect in Wisdom virtual conference. So we
Yes.
will have links to that in the show notes. The website's not quite live, but it's coming in the next couple of days, and ways that you can register for this free conference. I almost said concert, but I don't know if anybody's singing. We've got Dr. Joe Veazey. We might have a
We
little
do.
concert.
We might be singing to some trees, who knows? I've been known to hold a tune.
Right?
Yeah.
I totally love it.
Yes. Yes. Well, okay, ladies, thank you so much for joining us for episode 81. We'll be back live next week for the end of season 9. Okay, before we launch our book. Yes, so excited. In the meantime, be well, be wise, be whole. We'll see you next week.
See ya.